pick it up or get out." The words cracked across the restaurant like a slap. Bills and coins scattered on the tile floor, sliding to the feet of a man who hadn't even raised his voice. He was kneeling, one hand steadying a leather briefcase, the other resting calmly on his knee. He didn't reach for the money. He didn't flinch. He just looked up. The manager loomed over the counter, finger stabbing the air like a weapon. "You think this is some kind of game? People like you don't dump change on my counter. You don't belong here." A ripple spread through the room. Chairs creaked. Phones lifted. Somewhere near the door, a security guard pressed his radio to his mouth, watching closely as though ready for the takedown. Behind the counter, baristas froze mid-task, eyes darting between the manager and the man she was trying to erase. But he stayed silent, his hoodie plain, his jeans worn, his face calm in a way that didn't match the storm around him. To most, he looked out of place. To him, the place already belonged. "Sir, I won't ask again," she snapped. The words weren't procedure, they were venom. The sound of them stung more than the scattered bills at his feet. A customer whispered to her friend, "Did she really just say that?" Another leaned forward, phone raised higher now. In the back, a trainee server clutched her apron, her eyes flicking nervously to the nameplate on his briefcase. She opened her mouth, then shut it, not ready to speak but unable to look away. And then came his voice. Calm, low, certain. "Are you finished?" The question wasn't aimed at her, it was for the room, and the room answered with silence. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to him." The manager's cheeks flushed red. She mistook patience for weakness, silence for surrender. But restraint was his weapon. Every second he let her rant was a choice, a test. And she was failing in front of customers, staff, and cameras. Because the man kneeling on that polished floor wasn't broke. He wasn't powerless. He was the new owner. He didn't move to pick up the money. Instead, he rose slowly, the kind of slow that forces a room to pay attention. His hand brushed the leather briefcase at his side as if grounding himself. Then he straightened, tall and steady. The manager crossed her arms, satisfied with what she thought was control. "That's what I thought. Just another guy trying to make a scene," she muttered, her tone carrying across the counter. But he wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to watch one unfold. Customers leaned in. One man by the window whispered to his wife, "She doesn't know who he islanded." A teenager angled his phone higher, the red recording light flickering. The trainee server finally stepped forward, her voice small. "Ma'am, maybe you should—" "Stay out of this," the manager snapped, cutting her off. "You don't get to weigh in. He doesn't belong here, and I'm not wasting another minute." She motioned to security with a sharp nod. The guard moved closer, heavy boots echoing against the tile. "Sir, I need you to leave." His hand hovered near the man's shoulder, not touching yet, but close enough to sting. Still, the man didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself. He'd been here before, not in this room, but in others just like it. At 23, he'd walked into a diner after signing his first lease agreement. He wore a cheap suit, carried a folder of papers that proved his worth. The waitress had looked him over and said the counter was full, even though half the stools were empty. He left that day hungry, but not defeated. He left with a vow, never again would anyone else decide where he belonged. And now, years later, billions later, here it was again, different face, same script. He blinked once, slow, then fixed his eyes on the manager. "Run my name," he said, steady as a gavel. The manager scoffed, rolling her eyes. "We don't do that for walk-ins, especially not for you." The room shifted. Customers glanced at each other. The trainee whispered again, firmer this time. "He's not lying. I've seen that name before." But the manager doubled down, louder now. "This isn't your place. Pick up your coins and leave before I have you thrown out." His silence was louder than her shouting. He didn't budge, didn't blink. The money still lay on the floor between them, but the real weight pressing into the room wasn't the cash. It was the growing sense that something was about to break. The manager's voice cut sharper this time, as if volume could erase doubt. "Security, remove him, now." The guard straightened, a heavy-set man with a radio clipped to his belt. He hesitated for a beat, something about the man's calm unsettled him, but orders were orders. He stepped forward. You're wasting everyone's time, the manager said, her lips curling into a smirk. This restaurant has real customers to serve. She gestured toward the others in line, as though their silence was agreement. But silence wasn't agreement. It was tension, growing thicker by the second. A woman at the corner table finally spoke. He didn't do anything. He paid. I saw it. Her voice wavered but carried enough to turn heads. The manager spun on her. Mind your business, ma'am. The woman's husband frowned. She island. You're the one making this ugly. That crack in control made the manager double down. She leaned across the counter, eyes locked on the man with the briefcase. You don't belong here. Not in this restaurant. Not at this counter. And if you think throwing coins on the floor makes you powerful, think again. Then she did it. She scooped the scattered bills into her hand and dropped them back onto the tile with deliberate force, like tossing scraps to the ground. The sound wasn't loud, but the insult was deafening. Gasps rippled. Phones lifted higher. The trainee server stepped back, hands trembling. The man stood motionless, shoulders squared, silence unbroken. His calm wasn't weakness, it was indictment. Every second she shouted only proved her wrong. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, maybe we should... No, she snapped. Do your job. The guard reached toward the man's arm. Customers murmured louder now. A teenager near the door whispered, "This is messed up," as his phone kept recording. And still, the man didn't move. He didn't resist. He let the room see everything, the coins at his feet, the manager's fury, the guard's hesitation. It was no longer just a confrontation. It was a spectacle. Finally, his voice broke through, low and steady. You think throwing money makes me small. Money doesn't measure belonging. Actions do. The room stilled. Even the guard froze mid-motion. For the first time, the manager's smirk faltered. She looked around at the eyes on her, realizing too late that the narrative was slipping away. But pride locked her jaw. You're nothing here, she hissed. And in 5 minutes, you'll be gone. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that in less than 5 minutes, it wouldn't be him leaving. It would be her. The guard's hand hovered just inches from the man's arm when a voice broke the tension. Wait, don't touch him. It came from the trainee server, her apron wrinkled, her face pale but determined. She stepped forward, eyes locked on the manager. He paid. I saw the receipt come through the system. His name, it's real. The room shifted again. Heads turned. The teenager near the door swung his camera toward her, catching every word. The manager snapped instantly. Go back to your station before you regret it. But the trainee didn't move. She swallowed hard and said louder, You're wrong, and you know it. A murmur rolled through the restaurant. Customers who had been quiet now stirred, whispering, shaking their heads. A woman near the counter raised her phone higher. I'm filming this, she muttered, her voice trembling but resolute. The manager's face flushed, fury spilling over. Security, I said, remove him, and if you don't, I'll have your job too. The guard hesitated, jaw tight. His eyes flicked from the manager to the man standing calm in front of him, then to the crowd with their phones raised like silent judges. The man didn't flinch, didn't plead. He simply looked at the trainee, then gave the smallest nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that carried more weight than words. The manager slammed her palm against the counter. This is my house, my rules, she barked. From the back, an older customer spoke up, voice rough but steady. No, ma'am, it's not your house. You don't get to treat people like this. That line cracked the room wide open. The whispering became open outrage. A mother with her teenage son stood. A young man in a business suit shook his head and said, I've never seen anything this disgusting in a place that takes people's money. The manager looked around, panic creeping into her glare. You're all being manipulated, she shouted, her voice rising with desperation. This is a scam. He's a fraud. But the word fraud didn't land the way she wanted. It hung heavy, bitter, and false. The customers didn't recoil, they leaned in. They'd seen enough. The man finally broke the silence again, his tone cutting through the chaos like a clean blade. You called me a fraud in front of witnesses. That won't be forgotten. The phones caught every syllable. And just like that, the balance shifted. The manager still had her title. The guard still had his badge. But the man they were beginning to realize had something stronger. Fraud. The manager's voice rose above the murmur of the room. sharp enough to make a child near the window flinch. "This man is impersonating a customer. Call the police now." The word police sent a ripple through the restaurant. Phones lifted higher. The teenager at the door whispered into his camera, "She's really calling the cops on him. For paying." The trainee server shook her head, voice trembling but clear. "He didn't do anything wrong. He paid. His name is on the ticket." But the manager was already reaching for the landline, her fingers slamming the buttons like she could dial her way out of accountability. "Yes, this is Maple Street Grill," she said, her tone dripping with false authority. "We have a black male here attempting fraud. He's refusing to leave." Gasps. A woman near the counter covered her mouth. A man muttered, "She just lied to the police." On tape. The guard's jaw clenched. His radio stayed silent at his side, but the weight of hesitation showed in his eyes. He wasn't sure anymore whose orders he was following. The man with the briefcase didn't move, didn't interrupt. He let the words land, let the lies spread, let the phones catch every second. His stillness became louder than her accusations. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and cutting. "You just filed a false report. That's a crime." The manager laughed, but it came out brittle. "You think you scare me with your little legal talk? You'll be in handcuffs before the hour's over." From the back, the older customer who had spoken earlier rose to his feet. "Ma'am, you're digging your own grave. He hasn't raised his voice once. You're the only one screaming." The crowd shifted with him. Heads nodded. Phones recorded. The tide was turning, but the manager refused to see it. She slammed the receiver back into its cradle, cheeks flushed, sweat shining at her temples. "Security, remove him. This is your last chance." The guard took a step, then stopped cold. His voice dropped low, almost reluctant. "He hasn't broken any rules. Not one." The restaurant held its breath. For the first time, authority was cracking from within. The manager's face twisted. She pointed a shaking finger at the man. "You think you're clever? You think standing there silent makes you untouchable? You don't belong here. Not now. Not ever." And yet, even as she spat the words, her voice betrayed her. It wasn't control anymore, it was fear. The man looked at her, steady as stone. He didn't have to shout. He didn't have to move. The room already knew the truth. The story was shifting, and she was losing it. The room was already heavy with tension when the manager made her worst move yet. She bent down, scooped up the coins again, and this time hurled them straight at his chest. The sound was sharp metal clinking against fabric, then scattering across the floor like broken glass. A quarter spun under a nearby table, a dime rolled to a stop against the heel of a woman's boot. Gasps erupted. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." A customer near the window shouted, "That's assault." The manager's face was flushed, her breathing quick. She wasn't in control anymore, she was unraveling in front of an audience, every second caught on a dozen phones. The man didn't flinch. The coins hit, fell, and rested at his feet. He stood firm, rooted like he was anchored to the ground itself. His silence felt heavier than any outburst could have. The trainee server stepped forward, voice shaking. "You can't do that, that's—" "Quiet!" the manager barked, spinning on her. "One more word and you're fired." But the server didn't back down this time. She looked at the man, then turned back to the manager. "I've worked here long enough to know what's happening. You're not following policy, you're following prejudice." The room went silent again, but it wasn't the quiet of fear. It was the quiet before something breaks. The older man in the back shook his head. "She's finished," he muttered. A woman filming at the counter said louder now, "You just threw money at a paying customer. Everyone here saw it." The manager's hands trembled, but her pride forced her forward. "You think filming changes anything? He doesn't belong here. None of this belongs to him." The man finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he crouched not to gather the coins, but to pick up a single bill that had floated down beside his shoe. He lifted it, placed it gently back on the counter, and looked straight into the manager's eyes. "You think throwing money makes me worthless?" he said, calm and certain. "But every dollar you touch today is mine to begin with, and soon, this place will be too." Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. The phones caught everything, his voice steady, her face draining of color. The security guard stepped back, as if realizing the ground he was standing on wasn't safe anymore. The manager tried to laugh, but it cracked in her throat. "You're bluffing." The man's silence was the loudest answer in the room. And in that silence, the tide fully shifted. The customers weren't just filming anymore. They were waiting, watching. knowing they were seconds away from seeing something bigger than humiliation. They were about to see justice. The manager's brittle laugh still echoed when the man finally reached for his briefcase. The room held its breath as the latch clicked open. No one knew what he was pulling out. A wallet? More cash? Some kind of ID? Instead, he took out a phone. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He simply tapped one number and lifted it to his ear. The calmness of the gesture was almost unnerving, like a general signaling a move long prepared. On the second ring, a crisp female voice answered, "Yes, sir?" Every head turned. The manager froze, her smirk faltering. "It's time," he said, his tone measured. "Log this incident. Begin the internal audit. Lock the video feeds to archive." "Yes, sir, confirming now." The words rang out, crystal clear through the speaker. The trainee server's eyes widened. The guard stiffened. Customers exchanged looks. "What is this?" the manager snapped, her voice rising again. "Who are you talking to?" He didn't even glance at her. "Ensure timestamp and alert the board that the acquisition is complete. They'll want to see this." "Yes, sir." Board notification sent. The restaurant buzzed with a new energy confusion mixing with dawning realization. The woman filming whispered, "Board? What board?" A man muttered, "He's not bluffing." The manager leaned over the counter, desperate. "Stop pretending. Nobody here believes you own anything." But she was wrong. People were believing. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Calm, certain, like a man who didn't need to prove a thing. He lowered the phone slightly, just enough for the words to strike clean. "You wanted me gone in 5 minutes. Instead, in 5 minutes, you'll be gone." The phones caught everything, the tone, the certainty, the way the entire room seemed to lean toward him now. The manager tried one last push, voice cracking. "You're lying. You're just some guy with a phone." He looked at her for the first time in minutes, his gaze steady, unwavering. "Number, I'm the man who signs your checks." Gasps hit like a wave. The teenager at the door whispered into his camera, "Oh my God, he owns this place." And for the first time, the manager's confidence broke. The manager's face drained, but pride forced her words out. "You don't sign anything here. You're nothing but a liar." The phones caught her desperation. Every second of denial only made her smaller. The man didn't respond right away. He let the silence do the work. Around them, customers exchanged looks. The older man in the back whispered, "I told you he's not bluffing." The trainee server stepped closer to the counter, her voice trembling but strong. "I saw the staff memo this morning. A new owner finalized the deal last week. His name was on it." Gasps rippled again. The manager spun on her, wild-eyed. "You don't know what you saw." But the server didn't back down this time. "Yes, I do. And it was his name." The guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two women. His radio buzzed faintly, but he ignored it. For the first time, he wasn't sure whose side he was on. The man finally lifted the phone again. "Confirm personnel access." On the other end, the assistant's voice rang out, clear enough for the room to hear. "Confirmed. Current manager privileges under review. Would you like to proceed with suspension?" The manager's mouth fell open. "Suspension? You can't do that." He looked at her evenly. "I don't have to. The system already has." The guard leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Wait, is that true?" The assistant's voice came again, precise, undeniable. "Yes, effective immediately." The room shifted. You could feel the power realign itself in the air, like gravity changing course. Customers who had been watching quietly now raised their phones higher, whispering, gasping. The teenager near the door narrated into his stream, voice shaking with excitement. "It's happening. He just pulled her access. She's done." The manager gripped the counter, knuckles white. "Number, this is my restaurant, my authority." The man finally stepped forward, placing the single-dollar bill he'd picked up earlier back on the counter, slow and deliberate. "Number, it was never yours. You just worked here. You just forgot who you worked for." The words landed like stone. The restaurant fell into silence again, but this time, it wasn't tension. It was realization. Everyone in that room, customers, staff, even the guard, understood. The power had just changed hands. The manager's face twisted, desperation spilling into rage. "No!" she shouted, slamming her fist on the counter. "This is a scam, some tech trick. You all are being fooled." Her voice cracked, shrill, echoing through the restaurant. It didn't sound like authority anymore, it sounded like panic. The guard stepped back. The trainee server shook her head. And the customers? They weren't silent now. Murmurs turned into open defiance. A woman near the counter raised her phone higher. "Ma'am, everyone here just heard his assistant revoke your access. That's not a trick. That's reality." The older man in the back added, "If this is a scam, it's the most documented one I've ever seen. Half the city will watch this before lunch." The teenager by the door laughed nervously into his live stream. Her voice is literally shaking. She knows she's done. The manager spun wildly, pointing at phones, at faces. "Turn those off! This is private property!" "Oh." The man finally spoke, calm and deliberate. "Correction. It's my property, and you've just confirmed it on record." Gasps rolled again, sharper this time, followed by scattered claps from a corner table. The manager's chest heaved, her hands trembling. She looked at the guard for backup, but he only shook his head slowly. "I'm not putting my hands on him. Not now. Not ever." The trainee server whispered, "It's over," but loud enough for the crowd to hear. The manager's pride refused to die quietly. She grabbed the phone on the counter, her voice shrieking into the receiver. "Police now! Send someone! He's trespassing! He's—" The man cut in, steady as stone. "Every word you say is being logged. Every witness is recording. You're not calling them on me, you're calling them on yourself." The line went silent. She froze, the weight of his words pressing harder than any badge could. Customers exchanged knowing looks. A mother with her teenage son whispered, "She's finished." The manager tried one last time, her voice trembling, eyes darting like a trapped animal. This place is mine. You don't belong here." The man stepped closer, his presence towering without a shout. "Say it again. Say it to the man who owns the deed." The room went still. Phones locked on her face, on his, on the moment. And for the first time, the manager didn't have a reply. Her silence said everything. The restaurant had shifted. You could feel it in the air like a tide pulling back before it crashes. The manager stood rigid behind the counter, but her authority had already slipped through her fingers. The guard refused to move. The trainee server stood tall now, her fear traded for conviction. And the customers, they weren't just watching anymore. They were part of it. From the corner, a woman called out, "We're not leaving until this is settled." Another man added, "And it won't be her way." Applause rippled light at first, then louder. Phones caught every clap, every cheer. The manager spun in circles, desperate. "You're all wrong. This man doesn't own anything. This is my restaurant." The teenager live streaming shook his head. Chat's already blowing up. People are saying his name matches the new ownership filing. She's done. The manager lunged for the phone in his hand. He dodged back, laughter breaking through the tension. "Too late, lady. Thousands are watching already." Her voice cracked. "This is harassment. All of you out." But no one moved. No one obeyed. The man finally lifted his phone again. "Proceed." His assistant's voice returned, sharp and certain. "Manager Gregory status. Terminated. Credentials revoked. System updated." A chime echoed faintly from the back office access revoked in real time. The crowd gasped. The guard's eyes widened. The trainee server whispered, "It's true." The manager grabbed at her badge, staring down at it like it had betrayed her. The light on it blinked red. "No," she muttered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." The man stepped forward, his calm cutting through her spiral. "Your authority just ended. Everyone here saw it happen." The silence that followed wasn't fearful. It was liberating. The staff exchanged uncertain glances. Customers nodded at one another. The narrative had turned. From the back, the older man spoke again, his voice steady. "This is justice. Right here. Right now." Phones tilted toward him, capturing his words like testimony. The manager sank back against the counter, her chest rising and falling too fast. Her power was gone, and the room knew it. The man with the briefcase looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of witnesses, letting the moment land. Control had shifted, permanently. And the story of the woman who thought she owned the restaurant was over because the real owner had just taken his place. The chime from the back office was still echoing when the man's assistant spoke again through the phone. "Confirmation complete. Manager credentials revoked. Immediate removal logged in the system." The words felt final, like a gavel striking. The manager's badge flickered red once more, then went dark. She yanked it from her lanyard, slamming it against the counter as if force could bring it back to life. It didn't. Customers erupted, some with applause, others with cheers. A man in a suit clapped loudly, shaking his head. Justice served. The guard stepped back completely, his voice low but firm. I don't work for you anymore. He turned toward the man with the briefcase, almost tentative. Sir, do you want her escorted out? The manager's eyes widened, panic breaking through rage. You can't do this. I built this place. You'll regret firing me. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Number. What you built here was hostility, and what you regret will be the way you treated people starting today. He tapped the phone once more. Extend the suspension to all complicit staff. Begin contract review. The assistant's voice came quick, efficient. Understood. Secondary access revocations pending. Gasps rolled through the room again. The barista who had smirked earlier paled, looking down at her hands. The trainee server blinked, stunned, before realizing she wasn't being punished. She'd spoken up. The man turned to her. What's your name? Her voice cracked. Emily. He nodded. Emily, you'll stay. You remembered dignity when others forgot. That matters here. Tears welled in her eyes as relief washed over her. Customers clapped again, louder this time. The manager slammed her fists on the counter. This is my house. You can't erase me like this. The man stepped closer, his presence towering, though his voice remained even. Number. This is my house. You erased yourself the moment you threw money at me like trash. The room went dead silent. Every phone caught the line. It would echo far beyond those walls. Finally, he turned to the guard. Escort her out. She no longer works here. The guard hesitated only a second before nodding. He reached for the manager's arm, not roughly, but firmly. She yanked back, shouting, This isn't over. But the customers laughed now, not mocking, but incredulous. A woman near the window shook her head. It's over. We all saw it. And as the guard guided her toward the door, every step she took away from the counter was a step deeper into her downfall. The punishment was complete. The door shut behind the manager with a dull thud. For a moment, the restaurant was utterly silent, like the air itself was waiting for permission to breathe again. Then, slowly, applause spread across the room, scattered at first, then swelling into a wave. Customers rose to their feet. Some clapped, some cheered, others simply nodded. Relief etched across their faces. The man didn't smile. He didn't bask in the moment. He stood still, the weight of what had just happened grounding him. His phone was still in his hand, the assistant's voice faint in his ear. Termination logged. Staff notified. All systems updated. Okay. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his briefcase. Then he turned to the people who had just witnessed everything. You've all seen enough to understand, he said, his voice calm but resonant. Power isn't in the badge you wear or the title on your name tag. Power is in how you treat people when you think no one's watching. The words cut through the room. Customers leaned forward, phones still recording. Even the skeptical ones weren't doubting anymore, they were listening. He reached down, picked up one of the coins that had been thrown at him, and placed it gently back on the counter. His gaze swept across the room, steady, deliberate. Money can be picked up off the floor, dignity can't. The silence that followed was thick, charged, unforgettable. Emily, the trainee, wiped her eyes. The guard lowered his head in respect. The older man in the back whispered, That's the truth. The CEO straightened, briefcase in hand. His posture didn't demand attention, it commanded it. I don't need to replay this moment on video, he said, his final words sharp as glass, because I am the result of every moment like it. Phones caught it, customers would repeat it. And by the time the clip spread, it wouldn't just be a story about a manager's downfall, it would be a story about dignity that refused to bow. He turned toward the door, walking through the aisle as people stepped aside. Some clapped him on the shoulder. Others simply stared, knowing they had just witnessed something larger than a restaurant dispute. At the threshold, he paused just long enough to leave one last sentence behind. This place belongs to me now, but the lesson? That belongs to all of you. And with that, he stepped into the daylight calm, unshaken, untouchable.